It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. Go get 'em, George.
George Galloway, and the mother of all talk shows. Welcome to the Open University of the Airwaves with George Galloway.
It's a day of victory. Victory for Donald Trump, victory for the Palestinian resistance, victory for China in the greatest Streisand effect boomerang of all time. We'll be discussing it all and more here on the mother of all talk shows, the global open university of the airwaves, the college of knowledge, where there are no tuition fees and where everyone is a winner by the end. Stay tuned, it's going to be a bumpy night, so fasten those seatbelts, won't you? It's the mother of all talk shows.
Curious about our curriculum? Have something to say? Then call us now to join the debate on the mother of all talk shows. The only education you can get for free. George Galloway. The mother of all talk shows. With George Galloway. The world is our classroom, and you're welcome to sit in and join the seminar.
And a big thanks to Chris and Reese for that beautiful little musical interlude. Next show, it will be there in complete post-production clarity and brilliance. Deeply grateful to you, gentlemen, for that. It's a day of victory. It's a victory for Donald Trump. It is undoubtedly the case. But for Donald Trump's victory, this ceasefire about to come into effect in Gaza after hundreds of days of mass murder and mutilation, amputation and carnage, it's Donald Trump's victory. There is no doubt whatsoever about that. Before even taking office, Trump has brought about an end, albeit it may be a temporary end. Caveats included, it has brought to an end one of the most shocking and horrific passages of human history since the Second World War. Hundreds of days of sustained, unbroken mass murder, mutilation, torture, amputation, disappearance, and disgrace. It has been a period in which the state of Israel died, not died yet, physically, organically, but died in the minds and in the hearts of the people of the world. Nothing will ever be the same again. If the torture and mass murder, genocide in Auschwitz had been live streamed, it would have looked something like what we've been looking at over this last year and a bit. And Donald Trump, before even taking office, was able to order that it should come to an end. While Joe Biden, Genocide Joe, and Butcher Bloody Blinken, the Secretary of State for Mass Murder and Genocide, said that they were working night and day to bring about this ceasefire, which, as Mossad commentary just said on Twitter, could have been agreed on October the 8th. It's exactly the terms of the ceasefire proposed by the Palestinian resistance, scores of thousands of dead women and children ago. Mossad got it right. Blinken got it right today when he said that the Palestinian resistance had recruited at least as many new fighters as it had lost in the course of this genocide. Not me that's claiming that, Mr. Censor, Mr. Prosecutor General. Anthony Blinken, the American Secretary of State, said it today, that Hamas are stronger today than they were all these dead women and children ago. Donald Trump achieved it. He brought it to an end. But the resistance of the Palestinian people, their fortitude, almost superhuman in character, has again won the day. The Palestinian people have not been driven from the Gaza Strip. It remains illegally occupied territory, but it remains Palestinian territory. The terms of the ceasefire are complete Israeli withdrawal over the 3 stages of this process. Includes the return of the Palestinian refugees to the north of Gaza to rebuild the shattered and destroyed shanty towns called refugee camps that have built up there over half a century and more. They are free to enter and exit through the Rafah checkpoint. If the coward Sisi, a so-called general of the Egyptian army, opens the gates, then the wounded can be taken abroad for treatment. 600 trucks per day are to be allowed into the West Bank so that the people can eat, so that they can drink clean water, so that they can have fuel on these bitter winter nights, so that their children can be attended to in, albeit tent, canvas-covered hospitals that must now spring up like topsy all over the strip. All of the hospitals, all of them are destroyed. So we are returning to rudimentary field hospitals. But that must be done immediately because there are tens, maybe scores of thousands of patients who urgently need medical attention, all of which is now possible thanks to the ceasefire. The prisoners that the Palestinian fighters on October 7th took must now be returned. Those who've been killed under Israeli bombardment will return as deceased. But those who are still alive will be split into the 3 different stages and will be released. 30 Palestinian hostages will be exchanged for each single Israeli hostage. Well, that's partly because the world believes that an Israeli is worth at least 30 Palestinians. Actually, add a 0 to that, maybe even 2. But because Israel has an exponentially larger number of Palestinian hostages, prisoners held unjustly, held in most cases without charge or trial. They have many more prisoners in their dungeons. High-profile people will be included. I'm not going to name them for fear of jinxing it, but I'm praying for the return of some of the highest-profile prisoners of them all. I hope for the maximum number of Israeli prisoners to be released alive. I mourn the death of those who were killed by 15 months of unremitting onslaught by 2,000-pound bombs, all of them supplied by Joe Biden and Anthony Blinken. It proves the point that Joe Biden could have ordered this cessation scores of thousands of dead women and children ago. It proves the wisdom of the voters in Dearborn, in Michigan, and elsewhere who refused to vote for Kamala Harris because of her involvement and complicity in mass murder and genocide. It proves the wisdom of those 29% of Joe Biden voters in 2020 who did not vote for Kamala Harris and who placed the carnage in Gaza as the number one reason why they could not do so. It shows the wisdom of those of us who said, we'll not be happy that Donald Trump is back in the White House, but we'll be very happy indeed if Kamala Harris is not. It proves the wisdom of those like me who supported Dr. Jill Stein. It proves the wisdom of those like me who said, vote anyone at all. Uncle Tom Cobley, Panda the Bear, anybody at all, but not Kamala Harris. Because make no mistake about it, if Harris had won, there would have been no ceasefire today. Now, there are many caveats that have to be entered. First of all, Israel might break the ceasefire as they have broken hundreds of ceasefires before. Israel has shifted its murderous activities in the last hour from Gaza to the West Bank. They are bombing their own country. That's what they call it, isn't it? They don't accept that it's occupied territory. They say that Jenin is in Israel. In that case, they're bombing their own country from the air with F-16s, bombing refugees in their own country and any other country in the world. That alone would be cause for the greatest hue and cry, followed by sanctions and international ostracism. Israel is still breaching the ceasefire in Lebanon, still killing people, 5 today in Lebanon, even though a ceasefire under American supervision was long ago agreed. War may very well break out full scale in the West Bank and in Lebanon, but at least for now it will still in Gaza. And seeing those pictures of the deliriously happy Palestinians who've survived, 16% of Gaza's population has been murdered by Israel in 15 months. A kill rate which no genocide ever in modern times has ever remotely approached. And as we look at the ruins on the battlefield, we have to include amongst the casualties the entire respectability of being a friend of Israel. These friends of Israel are jointly, collectively responsible for all of the crimes that their friend has carried out. They have shilled for it. They have lied for it. They have pushed for it. They have paid for it. They have armed for it. They have covered for it every step of the way. And now, declaring that you're a friend of Israel would be akin to declaring yourself a friend of, think of the worst criminals in history. It would be akin to declaring yourself a friend of that. And we must drive home that advantage. Now that the bombs are about to stop falling on the tents and burning the refugees alive in Gaza, we must make sure that we torch what remains of Israel's standing in the world. We must make it as despicable an act to be in any way involved with Israel as it once was to be in any way involved with the crimes of apartheid in South Africa. That means a civic, civil, non-violent, peaceful campaign of boycott, divestment, sanctions, complete ostracism for the criminal apartheid colonial settler state that they call Israel. And we'll be charting how that's going here on the Mother of All talk shows over the next months and probably years. So, it was a great victory today. For Trump, yes, but above all, for the fortitude, for the sumud, the steadfastness of the Palestinian people, who've been through so many shocking tornadoes of horror in the last 76 years, and will no doubt have to suffer more, but who will never surrender. It is a lesson of what humanity at its best is capable of. We bow our head for all the martyrs in Palestine, in Gaza, all the children, all the women, all the men, all the mothers, the fathers, the grandparents, the sons, daughters, brothers, sisters, husbands, and wives. We bow our heads to them, and we ask God to make their passage to heaven easy. But it's not the only victory of the day. You've heard of the Streisand effect, right? When somebody does something to try and bring about a certain outcome, and it so backfires that it exponentially benefits those that Streisand, in this case, was seeking to suppress. The attempt to ban TikTok, or rather the Capone-like, mafia-like attempt to tell TikTok they had to sell their company to an American owner or be banned. Capitalism, right? Free markets, right? Give us your asset worth $100 billion. Give us your asset at a fire sale price, or we will close you down. It's the American way. Well, TikTok stood firm and refused to sell. And from this weekend, it will be banned. But here's what's happened. There has been a mass exodus of American TikTok users to another Chinese app called rednote. And more importantly, the second biggest gainer is the Chinese version of TikTok. Millions of young people in America are now watching Chinese TikTok. And they're picking up the Chinese language. And they're being warmly welcomed by the Chinese users. And a debate, a dialogue has begun between millions of American youngsters and millions of Chinese youngsters. rednote and the Chinese version of TikTok will soon dwarf every other platform of its kind amongst American youth. And so Capone didn't get his own way. Corleone made them an offer they couldn't refuse, but they did refuse. And they have successfully overcome this dread effect that the American gangsters were trying to achieve. Now, lastly, it's only a few days. Of course, on Sunday, God willing, on the show, we'll be diving very deeply indeed into what the new Trump government is likely to look like. If you want, by the way, to celebrate the fall of the Biden-Blinken regime, join me on Monday at high noon, 12 noon on Monday, outside the American Embassy in London. It'll be fun. It's not an angry protest. It's a celebration. To see the back of Biden and Blinken is worthy of note, is it not? So if you can be in London on Monday at noon, then get there and join me and my friends as we celebrate the last moments of the foul, vile Biden, Harris, Blinken regime. but the seeds are already sown of a hybridity, of a dichotomy between one part of Donald Trump's base and another part. The first part, much more long-standing and much more representative of the working class base of Donald Trump's new Republican Party, is led by Steve Bannon. Steve Bannon's war room is an indispensable place to go learn about what these debates are all about. Bannon will be fighting for the ear of Donald Trump. It's the war of Donald Trump's ear that begins on Monday, indeed has already begun. The other part, much more Johnny-come-lately, is the big tech bros, personified, of course, by the ubiquitous figure of Elon Musk. And Vivek, who might well about to be the new senator for Ohio in the stead of J.D. Vance, about to become Vice President of the United States of America. It's Silicon Valley and the West Coast against the South and the Midwest of the United States of America. You might think that they will paper over the cracks, but actually they are diametrically opposed. Marching sure behind the banner of the one and only Donald Trump, but marching for wholly different purposes on paths that will soon begin to diverge. We'll discuss that and much more tonight and on Sunday here on the mother of all talk shows. I'll be back in just 1 minute with the brightest star that's risen in the East, Jingjing, the Chinese journalist and broadcaster, to discuss the TikTok affair. Stay tuned. I don't believe that the mainland European countries give a toss about Britain, and I'm certain that the United States would not sacrifice itself for Britain. That's why I say Britain is completely marginalized. As for the Trident missiles, of course, if the United States, which has dual control over these missiles, gave permission for them to be launched, of course, they would incinerate Russian cities. But what good would that do us? Because we'd all be dead, including the people that fired the missiles. You feel me?
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
So the poll tonight, who will win the war for Trump's trust, Steve Bannon or Elon Musk? Get voting. You can vote on my Telegram channel, t.me/George Galloway, on my X, my Twitter handle, on the YouTube community poll, or on the YouTube stream. And if you want to call the show, it's free of charge in the US and Canada. +1 844 944 3344. It's free of charge in the UK and Ireland. 0808 196 5522. And the worldwide number 0044 203 966 2625. Get your calls in early and then we will call you back. Jingjing is the finest young commentator on Chinese affairs to be heard or seen anywhere. And she's even better seen as well as heard. She's a journalist, political commentator, and broadcaster supreme. Lee, welcome back to the show. Let's start with the great victory that seems to have been scored in the big tech war. The bullying and browbeating of TikTok didn't work. Banning is sure to follow, but the audience has gone to China instead of China coming to the audience. Tell us, How surprising was that outcome?
Okay, thank you, George, for having me. And we are witnessing a very interesting turn of events because the US government wants to ban TikTok because they worry the parent company, ByteDance, is a Chinese company. So that's why they want to force a sale of TikTok, force it to sell to an American company. But the result is that people in the US are flocking to an even more Chinese, an actual Chinese app. The Xiaohongshu rednote. It's used by people in China. It's in Chinese language. It's a lifestyle app. But these users, TikTok, they call themselves TikTok refugees from the United States. They are flocking to Xiaohongshu, to Chinese app, make this app the most downloaded app in the United States. And it's absolutely peak irony that this TikTok ban led Americans to explore Chinese social media and discover that pretty much all they've been told about China and Chinese people are just a lie. So on this app, we're seeing some of the most lovely interactions among average American people and average Chinese people. I can name a few. For example, I saw some very interesting and very touching comments from these TikTok refugees from the United States. One said, rednote got me wondering why we are always beefing with China. Love them. Another said, explain why China is my enemy. I have more in common with your average Chinese workers than I do with the American billionaires. So because of this authentic, touching, lovely interactions among the average Americans, average Chinese people, suddenly all these American users found out, whoa, Chinese people are really funny. They're really friendly. They're really nice. And now, today I saw the interactions got to a deeper level because now these TikTok refugees from the United States are asking more questions, such as, I just shared it on my Twitter. Someone asked, can we talk about the healthcare system in China? And I think the results, there were thousands of replies, American users sharing how expensive it is for them to have a surgery or even some like tooth problem or small flu. But then Chinese people were shocked. Wow, that expensive? That's like, so no wonder they suddenly understand why Luigi was such a big news in the United States. And also Chinese people been sharing how effective, how cheap it is here to go to a hospital in China. And now we also see some users in the United States asking, tell us what Western media have told us about China is wrong in reality. So there are much, much more deeper interactions happening on the social networks. And all Chinese people are very welcoming all these users from the United States. And actually, we are seeing users not just from the United States, almost from every Western country, the United Kingdom, Iceland, everywhere. There are new wave of users flooding to Xiaohongshu. So I'm very glad to see these authentic interactions among the people, because what the empire was trying to do is divide and conquer, separate people, fear mongering, and so to make people in the West a fear of the Chinese people. But turn out, like, when you have authentic interactions, it doesn't work anymore. And even more interesting, because they want to ban TikTok in the name of national security. They threaten the US citizens, like, Chinese people are spying on you. They are stealing all your data, all your information. But these TikTok refugees from the United States making videos on Xiaohongshu, on Douyin, sharing, you know what? I'm voluntarily giving all my information to China. China, take it. Chinese spy, I'm lovely to meet you. Because you know what? I think China is taking better care of their citizens than the US government. And and many of them even saying, I have more important things to worry about. I need to worry how to pay my rent and how to pay my other bills. So I don't care whether this software belongs to China or United States. I don't care. And China has been with us since day one. We wear clothes that are made in China. We use coffee machines made in China. So what? TikTok is made in China. So I think the deeper issue is these people flocking to rednote or Xiaohongshu doesn't mean they are supporting China's system, doesn't mean they are love China. I think the deeper issue is the U.S. citizens have trust issues with their government. So what the U.S. government should do is, well, to reflect, what have you done to make your citizens have so little trust in you that rather they don't choose Meta, they don't choose X, they rather go to an actual Chinese app and learn Mandarin Chinese to talk to the Chinese people directly. So it's a very interesting turn of events.
Well, as a famous Chinese man once said, sometimes the enemy struggles mightily to lift a huge stone only to drop it on its own feet. And that's exactly what the US government has done with this. But what will happen now to the American TikTok? Will it just be a memory of something that used to be? Or will, with a new president coming in, I mean, I did read some speculation that Mr. Musk might buy it. After all, he has very extensive business relationship with China. Is that a possibility, or will American TikTok just go the way of, I don't know, sarsaparilla and jukebox?
I think we will see the results after the 20th, after the new administration take office, and let's see the new president will make a final order whether this will be banned in the United States. So it only affects users in the United States. Users in other countries, you'll be fine. You still can access TikTok. But even in the United States, I think if they want to access TikTok, they still can find other ways, such as using VPNs. But let's see. I'm also looking forward to see the results. But I think so far we saw the administrations from TikTok. They are very they don't want to sell to a U.S. company. And so many users, these TikTok refugees from the United States, even saying, you know what? I don't want to see, as an American, I don't want to see TikTok being forced to sell to an American company. So I think we have to look for the results. But now, no matter what, I think this is a big blow to the U.S. corporates and to the U.S. government. Why their users are rather flocking to a foreign language app to know the supposed enemies that it's also interesting that the US government spent billions of US dollars on anti-China propaganda, but it looks like it doesn't work because their citizens are seeing through all the lies and rather make this effort to talk to Chinese people and talk to any other people in any other countries that has been demonized by their government. So let's see the results. But I really hope TikTok won't be sold to a U.S. company.
Well, the number one download in the U.S. This week is this rednote that you speak of. But the second biggest is the actual Chinese TikTok. It's a double whammy of extraordinary proportions and shows that when the people move, they can move very decisively indeed if there are enough of them. Now, you had the misfortune, you may not agree, to suffer a visit from the Bond villain that is Britain's Chancellor of the Exchequer, Rachel Reeves. She went to China, even though other parts of her government keep up an unremitting series of hostile acts against China. She was there, well, frankly, looking for a handout, looking for some kind of assistance for a British economy that is in a very precarious situation indeed. How was she received, if anyone knew that she was even there?
Any foreign leaders, politicians, when they come to China, we all welcome them with open arm, and our government, our leaders welcome them with open arm. I know sometimes even the politicians that made horrible remarks about China, But when you see news when they are in China, our leaders always welcome with the full respect, and I think that's our Chinese way. We have courtesies to our guests. And in speaking, you just mentioned the economy, and I know some Western leaders are still crying about the collapse of China's economy. But I don't know whether our viewers watch the recent news. China's trade surplus just reached a record high, nearly $1 trillion US. That's a enormous trade surplus in 2024 and highest ever share for countries in the Belt and Road Initiative. So I think that shows the resilience of China's supply chain. So no matter how media or some experts, economists, media projecting China's economy as very negative, its economy gonna collapse any minute, I think the results show the different, because with this trade surplus, there are some fundamental changes in this surplus, because China now, we have a lot of exports, of course, but what's being exported are changed. Last year, more high-end equipment were being exported, more high-tech equipment such as electric vehicles, 3D printing machines, industrial robots, and more domestic Chinese brands are being exported to other countries. And more partners have been working with China, either for exports or imports, over 150 countries and regions. And the number one trading partners are ASEAN countries, the countries in Asian Pacific regions. That's our largest trading partners, and also a lot more BRI countries. So that shows the largest, this shows resilience of China's supply chain. But of course, now China facing some challenges in terms of economy. Many media and experts, Chinese experts and politicians pointed out as well the real estate problem, the stock market problem. But still, all the economists in China that I've talked to have quite a lot of confidence about China's future, because all these challenges we're facing now are not that new. They've prepared. And China now, still among all the countries in the world, has the largest market, has the most complete industrial chain, industrial system, and also have the largest number of well-trained workers. So all of this made China's is basically irreplaceable. So I think working with China, doing trade, doing economy is an unstoppable trend. And the result, the trade surplus from 2024 shows that the trend is going very well. So I think that's a little bit of positive message to our viewers.
Finally, Marco Rubio is, if confirmed by the U.S. Senate, is the new Secretary of State. He made some comments today, which were really particularly threatening, a stepping up of belligerent language vis-a-vis Taiwan. He said that the U.S. has to show that any Chinese attempt at the return of Taiwan to the motherland will be too expensive. What do you think he meant by that?
Well, Marco Rubio is a very well-known anti-China war hawk. And a little bit, well, the new cabinet, the new candidates in the new cabinet is a little bit worrying. Many of them are war hawks. Some of them have experience doing trade and lived in China as well. So far, it's too early to say what the new administration gonna do to China. But I can tell you for sure, like you mentioned, the cross-strait issues, the Taiwan question is China's red line that cannot be crossed. And I don't think the United States really wants to start a war at the straits. They just want to use Taiwan Island as something to stick it to Chinese mainland. But so Chinese people, I think from the past year, our leaders met with US leaders several times. The message has been pretty clear. China, either the Chinese government, Chinese people want to work with the United States. We want to be friends with the United States. And actually, it's very important, not just for these two countries, but for the whole world, that these two countries get along and work together. But and we actually invite more people from the United States, from United Kingdom, from all the Western countries, come to China to visit us and talk to us. See for yourself. Does it really look like what the media have been telling you? And now China have this visa visa-free policies to 40 or 50 countries. So it's much easier for anyone in the West, in Europe, in the United States to come to China. The second, even though we are friendly, we want to be friends with you, we want to work with you, there are boundaries. The reunification between Chinese mainland and Taiwan Island is the thing all Chinese people want. It's the results of our unended civil war between CPC and KMT. So it's a civil war. It's a domestic issue, and the United States have no place to talk about, to have a say about Taiwan. So this is the fundamental red line. And I assure you, if they cross the red line, there will be serious consequences.
Li Jingjing, a very powerful note to end on. Thanks for joining us on the mother of all talk shows. Let me take a quick break, then it's your calls coming up right to the hour. Stay tuned. Jennifer wants to have her say. Go ahead, Jennifer.
I've had veterans, every generation of males in my family served in every war. My grandfather did 2 tours in Vietnam, and I married a Middle Easterner. My husband his family is from the Christian Valley of Syria. In going full circle, my grandfather actually died and confirmed Agent Orange exposure during the Vietnam War. And then my understanding now of what Israel was doing in 1967, it really starts to feel a strong resemblance to Vietnam and Ukraine being a distraction war, as all of these other things are going on. So I really just wanted to call in and just tell you how much we appreciate holding faith in the situation. You get to the point that you start to realize that each individual is just going to have to go through some of these experiences to come out stronger on the other side. We are mobilizing, veterans are coming together, speaking out against the war machine. The demolition project in the Middle East is basically occurring from all angles at this point. At one point in Syria,
it is.
It's like a demolition project is occurring from all angles. And really, why do you need Israel when you now have taken control over the land and prime real estate in the Mediterranean for luxury condos? They've cinched up all the oil. One thing that I would like to point out, and I never hear it discussed enough, in my opinion, 9/11 2001 was President Assad's birthday, and we have not passed an audit at the Pentagon since, and American taxpayers are missing trillions of dollars. We have homeless veterans out on the streets, and we're just not going to take this anymore.
What a call! Thanks, Jennifer. You definitely crossed a lot of T's and dotted a lot of I's there. 9/11 hasn't gone away, The secrets and lies about 9/11 will one day be out. It may be years, it may be decades. We don't know when the truths will emerge, but I think we can safely say from history that the truth will out. Jennifer, my salute to you and your family and your determination to carry on the fight. We're not defeated as long as we refuse to accept defeat and declare our intention to continue the struggle.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Who will win the war for Trump's ear, Trump's trust, Steve Bannon or Elon Musk? Get voting now on Telegram, on X, where it's been suppressed, this poll, I should tell you, on the YouTube community poll and on the YouTube stream. If you want to have your say on the telephone, here are the numbers. It's toll-free in the US and Canada, +1 844 944 3344. It's free of charge in the UK and Ireland, 0808 196 5522, and the worldwide number 0044 203 966 2625. Let's take our first call of the evening. Well, it's morning there. It's Sylvie in Melbourne on Palestine. I told you, it's the Global University of the Airwaves. Good morning, Sylvia.
Oh, good morning, George. Thank you for taking my call, and thank you, everybody. I want to pay tribute to all the people who've marched for months and months in the freezing cold, in the heat, in the rain, and we did it. We did it in a small way. We've been sneered at, we've been laughed at, we've been told that it didn't do any good, and actually, they were wrong. The thing is, we're going to continue to march. We're going to continue to be there. We're going to watch what they're doing, and we're not going to let them get away with it. We won't be silenced. That's all I've got to say.
Well, you say that's all you've got to say, but it was so beautiful and so powerful. I'm sure they're even now putting it in a can at the studio to play it back across the airwaves many times to come. This was indeed a vindication of all those who marched and protested, all those whose hearts were broken, but they decided to do something, anything about it. It is a vindication of all those who suffered discrimination, even loss of jobs and career, for standing up for the people of Gaza. And it is a condemnation, a bitter and eternal condemnation of those who stood against us. Sylvie in Melbourne, thank you very much for that bright good morning call. Now you can comment if you're watching on YouTube. Just scan the QR code now and leave a comment on the YouTube stream. Like Hugo Gutierrez, who says, why is BlackRock one of the investors of TikTok? I don't know, Hugo, I wish I'd been an investor in TikTok, don't you? DNDI says, indeed, ByteDance should just shut shop, taking everything with them, like Huawei did. And Purple Philosophy says, I'm loving rednote, I'm feeling right at home. Well, we opened an account on rednote, and we are right now broadcasting live on TikTok. I expect we'll be broadcasting live, if it's possible, to do so on rednote too. And Mega John F1 says, funny, Rubio thinks he knows more about Taiwan than the Chinese. It is funny indeed. And T Banda says, TikTok or fight the wildfires? That's a tough one. Excellent. Now here is the famous, the viral, the biggest clip ever on the mother of all talk shows. It's May in Oklahoma on the ceasefire. May, welcome back.
Hey, George. It's so good to talk to you. What a victory.
Welcome.
What a blessing. We are just at the very beginning. I have to say I'm cautiously optimistic, but my heart is just sailing. It's full. And I just pray that aid will come in time for as many Palestinians as possible. It's like I said, it's just the threshold. We're just opening this palace of possibilities, because maybe this time the public has proven to the politicians that we have power. We have the ability to speak up and defend the defenseless and help the innocent and try to find some justice in this world. And I'm very, very excited about this, and I'm just cautiously waiting to see what the next steps are.
Well, beautifully said. I think some people think that the ceasefire will break down quickly. I don't myself. Trump has put his name, his prestige on the line to this. I don't think he will easily allow Netanyahu, whom I'm perfectly convinced he dislikes intensely. Trump wants to be the only big bull in the China shop. He doesn't intend to share that space with someone like Netanyahu. He doesn't have to run again. He doesn't have to ask Miriam Adelson for another $100 million. He's the president. And for the next 4 years, he'll be concentrating on laying down a legacy, maybe even winning a Nobel Peace Prize. I mean, actually, you could say he's earned the Nobel Peace Prize by bringing about a ceasefire of a conflict that has riven the whole world, has torn the fabric of the international, juridical, and diplomatic fabric of the world. A conflict that has broken the hearts of hundreds of thousands of millions of people around the world. So actually, if you put the arm on me, I might sign his nomination form myself. But whether he gets the Nobel Peace Prize or not, he certainly wants to leave a legacy. And what I think will now happen is that Trump will put the arm on the kings of Saudi Arabia to try and pony up a new normalization deal. And he'll try somehow to revive some aspects of the so-called Abraham Accords. And all of that requires a ceasefire in Gaza. The Saudis could not possibly parley on any of that without a ceasefire in Gaza. And now I think we have one. May in Oklahoma, author of our biggest ever video clip with many millions of views. I'm grateful, as always, to you. Now, it's been a great week for the podcast. We're in the top 30 in Norway, Sweden, and, you listening, Gayatri, Indonesia this week. And we are, for the second week running, in the charts in Israel. You can download the MOATS podcast by scanning the QR code on your screen. Now, you can also listen to the weekly podcast on our website, moats.tv. And now we go back to England from Australia, where Terence is in Corby, and he wants to talk about Palestine too. Tel, welcome back.
Thank you, Mr. Galloway. Nice to hear you. 2 points. The first point is obviously the ceasefire, God willing that it holds. But more importantly, going forward, it's the role and the perceived shadows in the background of BRICS that is frightening the Americans, the money. BDS has worked a little bit. We have to keep our hammer down on that all the time. It doesn't end here. That lady in Australia was absolutely, it was breathtaking. Brevity was said, everything we needed to say. That woman needs the best medal the Australians can give him. The second point is, I think that Trump will come in and show on his way in, much the way that you do, and want to be the biggest bull in the China shop. But I think the same narrative will play out. However, they will still try to entice Iran, the great Persian people in the conflict, just to keep the pot boiling. I do hope, and I pray, and I really do pray for Palestine, and I hope that BDS keeps going and we keep boycotting day in, day out. And that woman in Australia, she didn't say much, but she said it all for me. What say you, Mr. Galloway?
Amen. You're absolutely correct. And as the bard said, brevity is the soul of wit, which we could all learn from. David is in Portland in the United States. And wants to talk about local progressive groups. I'm intrigued, David. What do you want to say?
Hi, George. How's it going? Love the show.
Good, all good. Thank you.
Icon. Yeah, you're one of the reasons I started actually going from an armchair revolutionary to in the streets and organizing. But it's a little bit of a confusing space. So I haven't heard you or people in your space talk about a particular group until yesterday. I watched Have It Out with Galloway, and you had Caleb Maupin on. Agreed with a lot of what he said, and then he talked about PSL, Brian Becker's PSL. I was in the PSL. Brian Becker is a large presence in it. He said that, this protest that he's organizing for the day before Inauguration Day, it's the 19th. I don't think it is the Inauguration Day. I think Caleb was mistaken there. But it may be used for, like for Antifa-like elements, people I've organized protests with the PSL, and we've had people all black blocked out, 30 strong, just show up to throw noisemakers and break windows in pro-Palestinian protests, just showing solidarity, random people wearing, completely covered clothing. That probably will happen on the 19th. If you notice, every Palestine protest, you zoom into the photo and you see at the bottom of the sign, it's the Party for Socialism and Liberation. I haven't heard them mention much in many spaces, but it seems like they are, at least in America and bigger cities, the vanguard force driving the anti-colonialist struggle. I was just weirded out to hear Caleb mention them yesterday and warn us about Brian Becker's protest. I
was a bit taken aback by it myself, David. I didn't expect it. It was apropos nothing that we were talking about. And I know Brian Becker. I've known him for many years and had perfectly good relations with him. I know nothing about his party of Socialism and Liberation, except that that's really not a good name for a party in the United States, in my view, but I'm just a foreign analyst after all. But I did agree with Caleb Maupin that it is foolish to hold a protest against Donald Trump when Donald Trump has actually just brought about an end to the slaughter in Gaza and seems determined to bring about an end to the war in Ukraine. We're having a celebration outside the American embassy on Monday at high noon in London. Not a protest. We're not protesting Donald Trump. The day may well come that we will have to. But he hasn't put a foot wrong so far. He's brought about an end to the slaughter in Gaza. What's not to love about that? He's committed to finally forcing the Zelensky regime to cease and desist in this bloody, awful war in Ukraine between NATO and the Russian Federation. What is there to protest about yet in the form of Donald Trump? So, although I don't pick runners and riders in the United States, I have no wish to recolonize you. And although I like some people, I don't like others, that's just immaterial and a question of taste. What you do in your country is entirely your affair. I can have a view on it, I can critique it, but I can't dictate it. So I'm halfway between you and Caleb Maupin on that point. But I agree with Caleb's fundamental point that this demonstration on the 19th could be hijacked by provocateurs who want the kind of Antifa madness that we saw in the United States in recent years, who want a recurrence of January 6th, who want to set fire to the Trump presidency before it's even got underway. So I agree with Caleb on that. David, thanks for your call. Here's some comments. Elizabeth K9 says, praying for a lasting ceasefire and a binding and lasting resolution. That means Palestinians can live freely in their own land of Palestine. And Monkey Boy says, does this mean Cyprus will return to being a holiday destination instead of a proxy Israeli airbase? Well, Monkey, I'm afraid Cyprus has lost me. Ben Vader sends $2 American, much obliged, Ben, and says we need UN peacekeepers into Gaza now. And Dr. L says at ground level, Gaza is total rubble and ruins. How are they going to live in such awful mess? Well, they're going to live in tents, and the world better get busy on funding and organizing the rebuilding of proper life in Gaza. Some more comments. Linda Lincoln says, I'm done listening to people telling me who is bad and who is good. I can see myself. Thank you. I stopped listening October the 8th to just about everything the US government tells me. Thank God, Linda. I thought you were talking about me. Poll update, 30% on Telegram think Steve Bannon will win the war for Trump's ear. 32% on Twitter, 33% on the YouTube community poll, and 33% on the YouTube stream. So Elon Musk is the runaway winner so far of our poll. Who will win the war for Trump's trust? Now, coming up after the break, we have an outstanding African. David Hundeyin, writer, award-winning investigative journalist, founder of West Africa Weekly, whom we interviewed about the crisis in Nigeria a couple of times in the last 12 months. We'll catch up with him on that and many other aspects of our turn to Africa. Stay tuned. I'll be right back. President Putin definitely isn't Nikita Khrushchev, who was a clown, in my opinion. Neither is he Stalin, but he's much closer to Stalin than any other Russian leader has ever been. He has a mind that calamity has hardened and turned to steel. He is extremely cautious, but cautious only for a purpose. He is cautious in the hope that the goals of the operation that he's involved the country in can be achieved. But no one should mistake that caution for weakness. I've met the man. 3 times I've met him. I've met lots of leaders. I've met leaders from all over the world, including all of the British leaders that I sat in Parliament under. Vladimir Putin is a very determined guy. He has a clear set of goals. He told you about them in 2007 in Munich. He warned you in 2007 that Russia regarded NATO encroachment in Ukraine as a red line matter for the existential survival of the Russian Federation, which it is his job to defend, and nobody should make the mistake of thinking that he will not do that job. People misunderestimated Stalin, but Stalin wasn't Stalin when he told the beast of Berlin that we will crush you in your lair. Stalin wasn't Stalin. Putin isn't Stalin. Trust me on that.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Okay, get voting on the poll. Who will win the war for Trump's trust, Steve Bannon or Elon Musk? Only 10,290 people have voted so far, a very low poll. albeit for a Wednesday night. Calls are slow too. The US and Canada, it's toll free, +1 844 944 3344. Free of charge in the UK and Ireland, 0808 196 5522. And the worldwide number, 0044 203 966 2625. This is probably your time to get on the show. If you call now, you have a higher than usual chance of doing so. David Hundeyin is a writer, award-winning investigative journalist, founder of the excellent West Africa Weekly, and I'm glad to say he's back on the mother of all talk shows. David, welcome back. Been too long since we saw you, but we have made our turn to Africa, announced in the last few weeks. So we will be doing far more on Africa and hoping to pick your brain as often as possible. And may I do so first off on the new president of Ghana. For those of us of a certain age, Ghana is a very significant place indeed. The president, Kwame Nkrumah, was a very great icon of the Bandung era, of the immediate post-colonial era. I myself knew Jerry Rawlings, half a Scotsman. Indeed, he was. I like to keep a weather eye on Ghana. And I note that the new president of Ghana is, well, he looks to me like a lot better than the guy that went before him. Have I got that wrong, do you think?
So, well, obviously that depends on whose perspective. Certainly, I think from the perspective of what is perceived as the general interest of Africa, I think you would have to say that's a fair comment. The new president, John Mahama, seems to be, first of all, a lot more aligned with his neighbors. As you may or may not know, the previous president seemed to go out of his way to pick a fight with his immediate neighbors. That's Burkina Faso, as a result of their exit from the ECOWAS bloc. And it was almost as if these two countries, which, bear in mind, don't even have a functional border between them. It's a notional border. It doesn't actually exist. And it almost seemed as if he was trying to provoke a conflict at a stage, which, needless to say, West Africa needs that like he needs a bullet to the head. But John Mahama, even from day one, you could clearly see that there's a change in direction. So, for example, the president of Burkina Faso was actually invited to his inauguration, and he actually made the trip. That was very significant because that is Ibrahim Traore's first international trip within Africa outside of the AES bloc since he came into power. So that on its own was quite a statement, that whereas the previous president was going to the French president, going to a US delegation and basically reporting his next door neighbors and accusing them of being puppeted by the Wagner group or whatever, in a way that, caused a really obvious diplomatic fissure between Ghana and Burkina Faso. The new guy seems to have done a complete 180. I mean, it's not set in stone, by the way. He hasn't, made any actual foreign policy decisions that have been gazetted yet. But it's very clear to see that there's been a change in body language. There's been a warming of relations. And I think that can only be good news for West Africa and for the world, really.
Now, I keep reading, indeed, I've read it so many times, I flick past it now, that France is being ordered out of here, there, and everywhere. And I see what are stock pictures of French soldiers getting on planes and so on. And the Burkina Faso is at the center of a cluster of countries now, former French colonies, that do seem to have toughened up their attitude to their former colonial masters. Is that being oversold, or is it real?
It is real. It is very real. The one caveat to that is part of this newfangled exodus of French presence from West Africa is also partially driven by France itself. because I think the French establishment has finally, belatedly realized that this growth of pro-sovereign sentiments across the region is not temporary, it's not a flash in the pan phenomenon, it's not going away, it's real. And that sort of staring down their noses at Africa and saying, you don't know what you're talking about, isn't going to cut it anymore with the generation of Africans that exist. They finally belatedly realized that. So they're, as I, put it to someone I was speaking to the other day, they're moving away from direct colonization to their first proper attempt at neo-colonialism. Because let's be very clear about this, the French have no intention of stepping away from West Africa. The French have no intention of letting go of their economic and political grip on West Africa. Without that stranglehold that the French government has on 14 African countries, France will be basically Portugal. It would not be what you would class as a world power. It simply would not be. The entire reason why France is in a position of power that it really has no right to be by geography, it's because of its hold on those 14 African countries. And France has no intention of letting go of that grip. So what the French government is trying to do at the moment is find a new method for exploiting those countries, which doesn't involve the sort of in-your-face tactics, which are no longer in fashion, because I think finally, after several decades, the Francophone bloc, well, let me not say across Africa, but at least in West Africa, has finally sort of got the message that this just isn't on. And to give you an idea of just how sort of blatant and in your face this thing was, up until a couple of years ago, so I visited Cote d'Ivoire, the economic capital Abidjan in 2021. It was quite common actually that you'd be in a car and you'd get stopped by French soldiers doing a stop and search on your car in the middle of Abidjan, right? Like a white French soldier speaking, a dialect of French which is not spoken in Cote d'Ivoire, stops your car, points an AK-47 or whatever rifle he's holding at you, and searches your car. So this isn't like a notional thing when people say that France has a military grip on those countries. It's a very real thing. It was a very sort of direct military occupation of these countries. And for a variety of reasons, partly because of the explosion of cheap internet access across the region, partly as a result of, as you mentioned, the political developments in Burkina Faso, which sort of catalyzed a wider movement. Finally, it has become a mainstream political position now that such things can no longer be acceptable politically across the region. So after spending the maybe 12 to 18 months trying to face it down and insisting that, these Africans do not know what they're talking about. Africans do not have any desire for freedom. This is something which is being driven by Russia or something. Like, Africans are just way too stupid to have such ideas on their own. These things couldn't have incubated from within the local political landscape. It must have been something that came from the Russians or Chinese or whoever. After spending 18 months doing that, the French have finally realized that this is real. This is not going away. This is not going to stop, and this is going to get worse. So now they're sort of finally rejigging their colonial architecture in a manner similar to what the British did maybe 50 or 60 years ago. And the French are finally sort of starting to execute the pivot away from direct colonialism to neo-colonialism, which I suppose represents some sort of progress, but it's important not to oversell it as well. So yes, definitely there is a shift happening, but it will be very premature to say that it's a total liberation that we're witnessing. That's not the case. It's important to mention that at this point, these 14 countries still use the CFA franc, which is basically the French colonial currency, which was imposed on them. They all still use this currency, including Burkina Faso, by the way. There are plans to leave, but so far these are still just plans, right? So if a country still has functional control over your money, then you cannot describe yourself as free, right? So and that's just one aspect of the control that France still exerts over these people. Even in the inner workings of the civil services of these countries, at every step of the way, you have French civil servants, you have French consultants that by design have been inserted into all of these places. So basically, these countries almost cannot run without French involvement. So this sort of pivot to freedom that we're witnessing is something which still has quite a way to go. So some countries are at a farther stage of advancement than others. Some, like Burkina Faso, have already sort of figured out how to completely ring fence their government and their economy without sort of direct involvement of the French, which is good. Some, like Senegal and Chad, are still maybe 7 or 8 years behind that. But having said that, it's a start. It's definitely a good thing compared to the Anglophone bloc. I think it's fair to say the Francophone bloc has been deliberately kept behind by several decades compared to like Nigeria or Ghana. So it's definitely good to see. But again, there's still quite a way to go, and it will still take a lot of efforts, and there's a lot of work that still needs to be done. So it's not time to celebrate yet, I don't think.
Well, speaking as someone who spends a lot of time in Portugal, I wish all European countries were more like Portugal rather than France, but I take your point. Now, the proximate reason for our acquaintance was the scandals in Nigeria, for which you paid a very high personal price. You basically had to up sticks and leave your own country and seek sanctuary elsewhere. What can you tell us, if you're able? I don't want you to put yourself in any further trouble, but what happened to the scandals that erupted? Did they just die away? And is the fellow that we used to talk about, Tinubu, is he firmly in the saddle for the rest of his term?
So it's quite a unique situation back home in Nigeria, because it's not as though the scandals died away or everyone just forgot. That didn't happen. And in fact, the legal outcome that I was pursuing the last time we spoke, which was I was in court with 6 U.S. government agencies trying to get his U.S. criminal records publicly released. So I was in court with the FBI, the DEA, the CIA, the State Department, the DOJ, and the IRS. And the FBI actually released I think they released about 1,000 pages of the 2,500 pages that they said they were going to release, and they basically redacted his name. The State Department claimed, after initially saying that they were going to release, I think, 900 pages of information, then said, well, we've reviewed our files and this is what we can give you. And they basically sent through a single document, a 19-page document, which was entirely redacted. So it was basically an insult. That's how I took it. The IRS claimed to have lost all their files and to have no records on this guy, which was, incredible. And then the DEA, which I found the most offensive, the DEA wrote, like, this is in the written court filing, which you can Google. The DEA said, based on a national security exemption, we are not going to release these files to you. And even further, we believe that while the Nigerian people have a right to know what their government is up to, that right does not extend up to knowing what their president is up to. And this is in writing, by the way. You can actually Google this. The DEA actually said in writing that 200 million Nigerians, you may have a right as a journalist to try to know what your government is up to, which is the job of a journalist. But 200 million Nigerians do not have the right to know what this individual, who is now the president, was up to before he became the president. Essentially because we own him, right? So, and then the CIA, in their own court filing, said, in so many words, due to the risk of basically outing an active agent, we are not going to release these files, which I interpreted as basically, we own this person works for us, and we're not giving him up. So, and by the way, this is like public knowledge in Nigeria right now, because this story was quite widely reported, actually. And unfortunately, it is the case that the U.S. State Department has such a powerful grip over Nigeria at the moment that, despite the fact that this is in the public domain, this is spoken about on the streets, this is not a secret anymore. I promise. This is everywhere. It has had basically no effect, because basically this guy, he has such overwhelming control over the country that with the 2027 elections coming up, his son is actually being positioned to become the governor of Lagos, which is the country's commercial capital. So not only is he basically the mafia boss who has captured the entire country, Africa's largest country, his son is now being positioned to basically succeed him, if you know how these things go. And basically nobody seems to be able to do anything about it. In fact, the path is being smoothened for his son. So I think this was yesterday or the day before, the Speaker of the Lagos State House of Assembly, who had ambitions of running for governor in 2027 and had publicly said so, and had publicly expressed opposition to the idea of the president's son becoming the governor, was hurriedly impeached. Like, this was like a 5-minute session and he was just impeached and replaced, and that's it. You know, so the path is being smoothened very blatantly for the president's son to become the supremo of the country's most important city, while his dad is the supremo of the entire country. And apparently nobody can do anything about it, least of all me. So, you know, imagine my frustration.
It might be a while before you can safely return, but it will also be a while before we'll have nothing to talk about. And I'm grateful to you, David, for coming back on the show. And go safely, please, because we'll definitely need to keep hearing from you. David Hundeyin, writer, award-winning investigative journalist, a man worthy of the name journalist, founder of West Africa Weekly. Check it out. Now, there have been 200 calls since I asked for more callers. So we're getting some of you on very shortly. Let me take a quick break. Then it's your calls right up to Gayatri's social media review. Stay tuned.
The 1897 edition of War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells. Read by George Galloway. Available only on Patreon.
The cylinder was artificial, hollow, with an end that screwed out. Something within the cylinder was unscrewing the top. Good heavens, said Ogilvy. There's a man in it, men in it, half roasted to death, trying to escape. At once, with a quick mental leap, he linked the thing with the flash on Mars. The thought of the confined creature was so dreadful to him that he forgot the heat and went forward to the cylinder to help turn. But luckily, the dull radiation arrested him before he could burn his hands on the still glowing metal.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Well, you basically get me as Orson Welles and many other things exclusively on my Patreon, patreon.com/George Galloway. For the price of a cup of tea per week, you can support this show. And on Mondays, usually, sometimes at other times, you get to have a private chat with me also. Let's take some comments. Christina Hines says, I like the way Africa stood up against the genocide in Gaza. It's good to see Africa fighting back against its country being exploited. And Torwin says, France is going to have to learn the hard way just like they did in Vietnam. KA says no more cheap plutonium for the French. And Nikki A says Tinubu is their man. He's probably compromised, that's why he's the president, so he can be controlled by the USA. Well, not many presidents in the world have got 1,000 pages in their FBI file. I warrant. Director's Cut says, imagine French soldiers stopping and searching you in your own country. Indeed so. Look, a word about TikTok tonight and a shout out to our top viewers of 2025. Since the 1st of January, globally, more people watched MOATS over 8 hours. Bish Bash Bosh watched for 5.5 hours. Thanks for that. And Ice-T 77 watched for nearly 4 hours. The best way to support us on TikTok is to keep tapping the screen to show TikTok how much you like MOATS and share the live. We're about to hit 60,000 on tonight's show alone. I didn't understand any of that because I know nothing about TikTok, but I'm grateful to Bish Bash Bosh and to Ice-T 77, words you never thought you'd hear me say. Matthew's on the line in England, in Milton Keynes, but on West Africa. It truly is the global open university of the airways. Matthew, welcome.
Hello, George. Can you hear me?
Hi.
Hello,
yes,
George.
Yes, very clear. You're on the air.
You have just achieved the first first person to have caused me not to answer a phone call from my son. I cancel everybody, but I will get back to him, I guarantee. Thank you for having me.
My apologies to him.
Yeah, I will send them on. Thank you for having me. I will try and keep this brief. It's I'm used to being in space, and this is a whole level up. Personally, I'd like to say thank you for standing up for reason and pushing back at Keir Starmer some time ago, who really had a paddy when you won an election officially. That was the most enjoyable political moment I've experienced, and I think you're a great politician. Whether or not you have a currency,
thank you.
That no matter to me, and I hope we get one for you. You find one soon. If you come to Milton Keynes, I'll be voting for you for sure, or wherever I'm. So I wanted to, because you had David Hundeyin on, and what a lovely chap, and I think the problem there with the interference of previous previous monarchies from other lands, the Commonwealth. So we have a French one, and I believe that we should be looking at very positive, very special solutions that are grounded in philosophy and the principles that are derived from philosophy as constitutions that work, that have reasoning behind them, and done properly. And clearly, I'm sure Canada may not have approved when I said that the monarchy should leave Canada entirely. They said there's a lot of royalists in Canada. I said that's fine, but you need to find your own king or queen. How you find that, we might give some guidance on.
Trudeau. Trudeau could be a princeling.
Absolutely not.
Or a princess even.
It has to, for Hegel, it has to be someone who is from nature, grounded. So if it was in America, I'd suggest a random selection of a Native American who was there originally before they got there. And then they have no power anyway. They are there to be respected, and they are the decision owner, and they don't actually, by design, they are respected, but don't get involved whatsoever. And the problem is the constitutional monarchy is a good one until the monarch starts getting involved, and King Charles is getting involved a lot more.
Yes, look, Matthew, I've been saying that myself. If America had a monarch and it had to be a Native American, you might get that Elizabeth Warren running. She is descended directly from Pocahontas, apparently. But I agree entirely with you. The monarchy was tolerable in the United Kingdom, whilst the late Queen Elizabeth stayed entirely out of politics. But I'm afraid King Charles isn't just deeply involved in politics, he's deeply involved in the worst kind of globalist and nation-damning politics, nation-abolishing politics. After all, if the WEF got their way, as Charles would like them to do, there wouldn't be any point in having a British state at all. And if you didn't have a British state, what would be the point of being the monarch of a non-existent state? Thanks, Matthew. John is in Kentucky on the ceasefire. John, welcome. Go ahead.
Yeah, hey, George Galloway. This is very exciting. So I got a couple of notes here, so just give me a chance to spit it all out.
Okay, welcome.
Okay, so you have the Israelis are still airstriking Gaza. So you had 18 that was killed yesterday. They just killed 50 today. I'm just kind of, promises are meant to be broken, so I'm just kind of worried about if this deal could be like some sort of underhanded deal. You've had Donald Trump, who's lied 30,000 times in the first term. He likes to lie to the contractors. He was known for getting the contractors to do all the work, and then he wouldn't pay them. So I'm just kind of curious, maybe this could be a way to lower the guard of Hamas, only to attack them as soon as they lower the guard. So I think it is a welcome development. I'm very, excited about it. But basically, you hope for the best, but you prepare for the worst, right?
Absolutely, yeah. No, I mean, you're absolutely right, John, to be skeptical and cautious about it. I myself think that there will be a ceasefire and it will hold. And I think it will hold because Trump's put his name on it. He's claimed, and I think rightly, that he achieved it, and he will not want it to go up in flames in just a few days or weeks. Secondly, I think he has big ambitions of using his leverage with the next king of Saudi Arabia, the heir presumptive, MBS, to use his relations with him to make a new dispensation in the Middle East. And that requires a Palestine which is at least quiet, if not free, definitely not liberated, then at least quiet. And so they cannot go on killing large numbers of Palestinian women and children and think that countries like Saudi Arabia can do business with them. I think that Trump is the master of the deal. I'm rereading his book, The Art of the Deal. I can already see some of the modus operandi in that book in his play for Greenland, for example, in his play for the Panama Control, in his play for Canada. The Princess Trudeau better get busy because they might not be an independent state for very much longer. John, thanks for the call. Wendy is in California on the ceasefire. Go ahead, Wendy.
Hello there, George. Well,
hi.
I met you in California at a conference quite a while ago, a few years ago. Remember when you were doing the convoy to Gaza? You were attempting. Yes, and that was so amazing. I actually got a seat, but then I chickened out and gave it to another activist because, I'm just afraid of going anywhere near where those Israelis are because, they're obviously out of control. But what my question is...
Well, don't worry. We'll be back in the U.S. We'll be back in the U.S. this year on tour. So we'll make sure we stop off at least a couple of places in California. So you'll get another chance.
Yes. One I think you were at, I think it was Irvine or something like that, California.
Irvine was our base. We had great friends in Irvine. I loved it. The best place I've ever been.
Wonderful.
The only place I've ever been that I could see myself living in the United States was a place called Carlsbad. I don't know if you know it. It was an absolute dream of a place.
Yes, indeed. And thank God they always seem to evade those horrible fires that California is often plagued with.
Yeah.
So anyway, by the way, I'm a realtor,
indeed.
so I can help you buy some property there, girls. Maybe. Anyway,
Well, I have to speak to the wife. I doubt if we could afford it, but we'll see.
I know. It's pricey. Well, it's just beautiful here, except for those challenges with, first of all, those fires. But my question to you is, there's supposedly a ceasefire happening, and Trump was definitely a factor in this. And I also credit people like Jeffrey Sachs, who made that big statement. God bless him. And then people like all the activists, including yourself, all the activists that have been making noise about what Israel is doing, the genocide. And so, it takes a world to make this happen, but thank God Trump is leading the pack. But my question to you is, can we celebrate? It seems like it's too soon to celebrate because we don't know, what's really going to happen. I just don't trust those Israelis. They say one thing and do another. Look what they're doing in Lebanon. So what is your level of optimism for this latest attempt at a ceasefire? And that's my main question. So I'll let you answer
well, at
that.
At least 75%, Wendy, and cautious celebration. A non-alcoholic glass of champagne, perhaps. Actually, I recommend that in general, especially date champagne. Has anyone out there tasted date champagne made entirely from dates? And of course, non-alcoholic. It is superb. If I could get my hands on one of those this evening, which I definitely can't, I would be having a glass of that and quietly, cautiously celebrating. But you are absolutely right to say, God bless Jeffrey Sachs and all the other speakers and activists who have striven might and main in all weathers, in all countries, in all parts of the world to help bring about the atmosphere that has prevailed and has forced the American presidency to be changed, and for the American presidential policy towards the war to be changed. I'm in no doubt about this, why I mentioned them first. Trump is the reason there is a ceasefire. He is the reason. If Harris had won, there would have been no ceasefire. That's quite an achievement, before you've even got your feet in the presidential slippers. Look forward to meeting you in sunny California, Wendy, at least when the fires die out. Comments. Kim Cousins says, I've been to China and I found the people to be lovely and warm. I dare say the Russians are the same. All this hate is crazy. Absolutely right, Kim. And Debashus D says, George, can you invite Mr. Trump on the show? Well, I'm hoping when we get there, we'll be definitely trying to interview people close to President Trump, and I'd very, very much like to interview him. After all, he does interviews with lesser British television personalities, if you know who I mean, Pierce. Sultana Bhatti says, no American president deserves any peace prize. And Neil Curry says, Trump will have one in each year, like any Borgia king of old. What a very clever comment, Neil Curry. Ping 1 says, GG, Trump said, finish them, Palestinians off. What the F are you on? Yeah, but he just got the ceasefire, right? You got to be able to distinguish between what Donald Trump says and what he actually does, and what he says on one day and what he says on another day, and what he says on that day with what he does that day or the next day. What the hell are you on? Tony is in Surrey. He wants to talk about King Charles. King Charles III, I suppose, Tony, but we could give them a history lesson if you'd like.
Good evening, George. Well, it's a couple of things, okay? One about Charles and one about Andrew, which I've given up on both. But we agree Prince Andrew is a joke, right? The king could put him in the tower. It won't be the first royal in there. Then he'd be out the way and the king could sell his royal lodge.
Well, it would be quite a real estate deal. Think of the real estate, Tony. I mean, King Charles even owns the bottom of the sea off the coast of Cornwall, which is a very big county. He is charging the NHS for land that he owns that is being used for NHS purposes. National Health Service. He is the sovereign of the nation. I mean, you'd run out of time on any show, however long, to adumbrate the case for the defenestration of any king of England. My 7-year-old daughter she got her first history lesson at school today, and it was about the Victorian era. And in the course of a very interesting conversation with her in the car, picking her up from school, she said, "Who picked the kings and queens?" And I made the point to her that actually that's the point. Nobody picked them. They picked themselves. How could they pick themselves, she said. That means Mummy could announce that she's the queen. Well, she'd be a better one than Daphne or whatever her name is, Camellia, in the palace at the moment. But I said, no, they won a war. They killed enough people, put enough people in the tower, disposed of enough rivals, and then called themselves the king. And then their son and their son and their son became the king. When you think about it, Tony, it's absolutely bonkers. And I'm glad you gave me the chance to get that off my chest. Tony, call back again and we'll talk further. Now, I have another show, apart from the mother of all talk shows. It was absolutely brilliant this week. It went out last night. You can still see it. But if you want to be on the next one, here's how. Watch this. Join me every week to Have It Out with Galloway. We discuss the great issues of the day and occasionally the odd philosophical meandering through the meaning of life. You can be on the show by contacting us at our website, haveitoutwithgalloway.com. You can be the star of the show. Join me on Have It Out with Galloway. Come and have a go if you think you're hard enough.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
So you can watch Have It Out with Galloway on my YouTube channel, and then it seems to spin everywhere around the world, but you can watch it first on my YouTube channel on Tuesday evenings at 7 o'clock. But if you want to be on the show, that is to say, on the video wall, talking directly with me, with the whole international audience, hearing what it is you've got to say, then you need to write to the website, haveitoutwithgalloway.com. Let's take a quick call before Gayatri gets in. Mohammed in London on the ceasefire. Go ahead, Mohammed.
Hello, George. I just want to say I am very happy for this ceasefire, but you say at the beginning of your show that it is a crime to be a friend of Israel. But I am a friend of Israel. You know why?
Yeah, I know that you're not Mohammed. And you know who I know who you are, Mohammed. You are Elvis. You're that mutt that used to murder Elvis songs. You used to murder Elvis songs on the mother of all talk shows until your love affair with Israel made it impossible even to listen to your Elvis songs. They were funny for a time until we discovered you were a creep. Luckily, Gayatri has arrived in the studio with the social media news. What's rattling, Gayatri?
I just wanted to reflect firstly on the two wonderful interviews we had today, focusing on China, on Asia, on Africa, as we promised. People are very raving about our guests.
I'm very glad.
Yes, they are. We have Easy D saying, thank you, David, for your analysis, breaking down French exploitation in Africa and touching on the newly elected Ghanaian president. I don't think a lot of people knew that with French, the French influence was as such in Africa until recently.
I mean, for as young a man as David to have been in the capital of Côte d'Ivoire and stopped by white French-speaking soldiers, I mean, the Foreign Legion is surprising. It surprised even me, and I know a thing or two.
Well, exactly. And also the fact that our hero, president of Burkina Faso, Traoré, it was his first international African trip, really, which is really very impressive. I mean, it is today, in 1965, that Che Guevara visited Ghana.
I just saw a picture of it. Someone sent me a picture of Che in Ghana
with Kwame Nkrumah
in 1965.
Historic pictures.
Very historic.
And I'm so glad. I mean, obviously, David was very careful about it, cautious. We have yet to see, but the signs are looking good, positive.
David had to become a fugitive, you know, as a result of his journalistic efforts. I mean, he almost ended up in a Julian Assange situation, or worse. He could have faced even worse. And it took him a long time to find a shadow that he could stand in, as he did on our show again tonight. But his words were very powerful and wise.
Yeah, and just to touch upon Ghana again, MK says, firstly, get out of the French franc system. Talk to the Tunisian economist Fadel Kaboub, who has done extensive work to this end with the African countries colonized by France.
Okay, make a note of that,
we'll
please.
look into that.
We stress we're not just against French colonialism, we're against American, British colonialism in Africa too. We want Africa to be free and to freely realize its enormous potential. We're very interested in the role of China and Russia in Africa. I myself was involved. We were on a plane with a couple of, well, how shall I put it, former comrades from the liberated Angola and Mozambique just the other day, coming back from Venezuela. And I was recalling, I didn't tell you because it would have told you how old I was, the best years of my life that I spent fighting for the freedom of Angola and Mozambique. And in the end, we did defeat apartheid. We did defeat colonialism. And then it's up to the people of Mozambique and Angola what they do with their countries. And both Frelimo and MPLA are still in power, but maybe for not that much longer, because they've let down their people. So getting rid of colonialism is necessary, but it's not sufficient. You then have to build a proper, democratic and fair society where the bulk of the wealth isn't siphoned off by, well, people that used to be liberation leaders. You know what I mean?
You know what I mean? I know what you mean. It's also the same argument you use for Brexit.
Yeah.
Necessary but not sufficient. Exactly. Who will win the war for Trump's trust? Edward Grant says neither, or anyone in Washington, because trust is not the name in the game there.
What does that mean?
Trust, I mean, trust between,
yeah,
exactly. They don't, I think people are...
There's deep fissures, deeper than they seem. This H-1B1 visa thing was an eruption that showed a fundamental dichotomy between these two parts of Trump's coalition. The Make America Great Again crowd and the Make Big Tech moguls like me great, even greater branch. And Trump will, of course, he's a very good businessman, a very good politician, actually. He'll try his best to balance these two things, but the moment may come where he has to choose one way or the other way. And that might not be pretty.
Yeah, exactly. But Roy Douglas argues Trump is all about enriching himself. So right about now, he's going to cozy up with Musk. Once he realizes that Musk is a better con man than he is, the bromance will be over. But not before Musk gets even more government contracts for little return. Trump will not tolerate anyone who challenges him.
No, that's right. And there are some signs of where you could see a strain developing, let me put it that way. Some pre-strain signs of where that strain will come. But Musk is moving into the White House. You remember those pictures when he took over Twitter, carrying in sink? Well, he's about to carry that sink into the White House. And that's not a small thing. To be proximate to the president means you've got his ear anytime he comes to the sink to wash his hands. So it's definitely Musk for now, and our poll shows that. But whether that will always be the case, I don't know.
No, exactly. But what can't be denied either is that after 466 days, this ceasefire has been achieved. The phases we have yet to find out how they will go. And then, so therefore, Paul Jones says, will Trump therefore get the Nobel Peace Prize quicker than Obama?
Well, I know,
I
hesitated to raise the point because of the farce of Obama getting it and going on to drop bombs on more countries in the world than any other American president ever. And that's saying something. And Obama was bombing people every day of his 2 presidential terms. But he did get the Nobel Peace Prize. Well, I mean, I'd say, I'm going to get ridiculed for this, I would nominate Trump today for the Nobel Peace Prize. I might well regret it a month or so down the line, but I am so exultant. Show your nail. This, I want to pay tribute to you and our children for all the efforts that you have made, and to all the people of the world who fought to bring about this day. And we have won. The Palestinian people have won. Their resistance has won. And their cause has won. That's not a small thing. And it wouldn't have happened if Trump had not won the presidency. So, ipso facto, Trump is a Nobel laureate for me. Anything else before I go on to a couple of late calls?
No. Go to your calls. Just want to say that I too have downloaded Rednote.
Okay. Everyone to Rednote. It's a great name.
It is.
I can't pronounce the Chinese yet, but our children will, because they are becoming very fluent in Chinese. Well, let me go to Wigan. Who wouldn't? The road to Wigan Pier, where Alan is on the Trump picks. Go ahead, Alan.
Hello, George. What wonderful news, that ceasefire. It's absolutely fantastic.
It is.
The carnage has come to an end.
It really is.
But, George, will we ever know the final death toll? Our disgusting political class have been complicit in this genocide. And, my God, the mainstream media too. You and I both know that the death toll is far higher than the 45,000 figure. I mean, will we ever get to know the final figure, George? And all those people...
Well, I think one of the... I'll let you back in, Alan, for your other point, but let me answer that one. I think one of the great things about the ceasefire is that there will be an absolute flood of journalists and photographers and filmmakers into Gaza. So we're going to hear thousands of stories that we were unable to hear because the Western journalists were kept out and the local journalists were systematically murdered. Never forget that. Israel systematically murdered hundreds of Palestinian journalists and photographers precisely to stop the truth from coming out. But now that there's a ceasefire and 600 trucks a day, there'll be a lot of people on the back of those trucks, Alan. Go on, Alan. Take 2 or 3 minutes to make your next
George,
point.
Just a quick one about Donald Trump. Do you think he's playing some sort of long game? I mean, some of his picks of late have been worrying, to say the least. And I really don't know how the mechanics of American politics work. But if he does get sworn in on the 20th, and I say if, because anything can happen in the next 5 days or so, do you think that the likes of Rubio and Huckabee and Kellogg could be taken down when he's finally sworn in? I mean, it's just one quick.
Let me put this thesis to you. It was put to me on air and by one of our guests, and it's not a bad one. He's got all these people in his tent, but he's the ringmaster. So little Marco Rubio, who's a venal and vile individual, although not to be underestimated, he's more smart than you might have thought by the way that Trump used to kick him around in years gone past. He is a theorist of some considerable power, and his theories are as dangerous and vile as it's possible to imagine, not just for Latin America, where we've just been, but for many other parts of the world. I put to Li Jingjing earlier the really belligerent statement that he made about China just this very day. We are effectively threatening war against China. This man is potentially World War III in his pint-sized pockets. He is the Secretary of State, but the Secretary of State works for the President. So maybe Trump's thinking is get these people inside the tent where they can only miturate outwards, rather than have them outside the tent miturating inwards. That is a thesis. Time will tell whether it, if you forgive the pun, holds water. Tony is in New York on the ceasefire. Go ahead, Tony.
George, can you hear me?
Yes, very clear. You're on the air.
Okay, well, first of all, I want to say that I've been listening to you since the 90s in WBAI. That was also the mother of all talk shows.
Wow.
And
it was.
Yes, so I'm 54 now, and I was in my 20s as a political science major at Montclair State University. And, you know, I would listen to BAI, and I'm totally enthralled with your perspective, and now even more. So my question is this.
Thank you, brother.
Yes. Well, what would Comandante Fidel Castro say about Gaza right now if he was alive?
Well, I'll tell you, I did have a conversation with a dear friend of ours, Alicia Castro, former Argentine ambassador to London, and prior to that, an Argentine MP. Prior to that, the Argentine ambassador to Venezuela. And we talked not about what Fidel would have done. I'll tell you what he did in southern Africa. He sent 55,000 Cuban volunteer soldiers to go and fight apartheid and smash it, defeat it, fundamentally kill it in Quito, Cuanavale, in the great battle in Angola. And 10,000 Cuban volunteers left their bones in the African soil, which is not irrelevant to the point I'm about to make. Alicia was making the point, she knew Hugo Chavez so very well, that Hugo Chavez would have had a real problem with the last 15 months because he was a man who felt that he had to do things. She used a French word, a Spanish word, omniscience. He felt that he had to be present in such monumentous crises as that. And she thought that Comandante Hugo Chavez definitely would have gone to Gaza. he would have put himself in Gaza, in the middle of all this horror, because he would not mentally, psychologically have been able to bear the shame of not doing so, of merely talking from the sidelines, merely condemning. He would have preferred to go there and die there. That's the kind of man that Comandante Hugo Chavez was, and the kind of man that Comandante Fidel Castro was too. I'm glad you gave me that chance, Tony. That's a zinger. That will fly. That'll be a clip, and I'm glad you gave me the chance to do it. And I'm glad you all came here tonight for the midweek mother of all talk shows. God willing, we'll be back on Sunday night with the mothership, the mother of all talk shows, on the eve of the inauguration of President Donald J. Trump. We'll be asking you if you're looking forward to it or not. For me, as a political commentator, I'm looking forward to it. All right. It's been marvelous. Thanks for being here. Good night.